Hey everybody, good to see you on a Sunday night. So this is the first of our Sunday night off-season live streams, 10 o'clock Eastern time each and every Sunday night. So we're off to a good start, I believe. My apologies for being late. A few different reasons for that, but we are quarantined here at the MarkRogersTV Voice of College household. Voice of College Football, I believe, is what we named it, if I recall. Good to see everybody in the live chat. Yes. So we'll talk, maybe continue the conversation from last night and from earlier today. So we went live earlier today with the Trace Sermon news, going to Ohio State, the transfer running back from Oklahoma, who gained 1,000 yards a couple years ago, 13 touchdowns for the Sooners, ran into some injuries here in 2019. I was checking out some of the top newcomers in college football, some of the top freshmen, the most anticipated freshmen signees who could play significant roles for their teams in 2020. I was looking at that this afternoon. Could be an interesting video in the future in subject line. So what we talked about last night are the biggest gainers and losers in terms of increased wins and losses from 2019 to 2020 projected. As it was a bit of a surprise to me that we had 20 teams in the Power 5, 20 teams in the Power 5. So out of 75 teams, 20 last year either gained at least 3 wins or decreased at least 3 wins. 5 in the Big Ten, 5 in the ACC. They led the way. So who are those teams going to be coming up this season? We had a nice little discussion about that last night, and I posted that on my Twitter profile page as our Twitter Voice of College Football poll of the day. And we've only got 4 slots. So the biggest gains, expected gains, the team that's most likely to gain the most wins this season. I threw up Arkansas, who went 2-10 this past season. Northwestern was 3-9 in 2019, of course, after going to the Big Ten championship game the year before. Stanford coming back down to earth after a decade plus of top 25 type play at 4-8 last year. Could they gain 3 games at least? And then also TCU at 5-7 last year. Good to see everybody in the live chat. I'll get to your comments in just a second. So I was trying to figure out what we're going to talk about tonight, but I want you guys to lead the show with your calls. Here comes the number, 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. So if you follow me on Twitter, number one, what you can do is be eligible to serve, to send me, we'll put it that way, to send me your poll recommendations, to give me your poll recommendations of what we should, what topics we should use for our future Voice of College Football polls to be placed on Twitter, and we'll send those to the Twitter page and go from there. I'm going to let this one ride for about 3 days. We've run quite a few polls in the last couple weeks. DBU, what school is that? LSU, Ohio State, Miami, or Florida? Apologies to USC and Texas. Florida State fans, are you happy with the hire of Mike Norvell? Miami fans, are you happy that Manny Diaz is your coach? We got about 53% positive response for Manny Diaz. Overwhelming positive response for Mike Norvell. Of course, he didn't go 6-7 last year, and he wasn't the coach and hasn't coached a game or hasn't lost a game yet for Florida State. So Seminole fans are pretty pleased with Mike Norvell at this point. At 84% positive response on the hiring of Mike Norvell. 860-325-3687. I released a video just the other day on my top 10 non-conference games of 2020. So I wanted to get to those as well. I am really scattered all over the place in regards to my notes. And what's where, because I was going to run down some of the top games for 2020, the non-conference games. We can also look at the best conference games because, of course, the Big 12 is the only conference that we know everybody plays everyone. So sometimes we get some interesting in-conference matchups for some teams that don't normally play. I was looking at Clemson today. I see Pigskin Pete's in the live chat. I was looking at Clemson today because we got some questions and conversation about Clemson last night. So Clemson's 2 non-division games, not that it matters, but there are 2 non-division games. Of course, Georgia Tech, their rival. If you didn't know that, Georgia Tech and Clemson are rivals from way back. So that's the designated rivalry game in the ACC for Clemson and Georgia Tech. And then the rotation comes up on Clemson and, oh, now I forget. Now I've forgotten who they're going to play. Of course, last year they played North Carolina, and that turned out to be the best game that they played all season in the regular season, 21-20 with the 2-point conversion stop at the end. I'll have to go to Clemson's schedule and find out who they play. Again, not that it matters. 2016, it was Pitt. That was the last time they lost to a Coastal Division team, I believe. Oh, I blew it. So I've got to go in the right sequence, unfortunately. I don't know what's wrong with this iPhone, that it really matters that I put it on speaker before I hit the keypad there. There, you guys are patient with me. All right, let's try this again. Go to speaker, then we go to the keypad. There we go. Hey, it's MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Michael Hoke. How you doing tonight, sir?
Michael, I'm doing just fine. If I remember correctly, I don't remember exactly what the comment was, but you left me some kind of comment today about Purdue. Am I right on that?
Yeah. I think, yeah, it was. And I was just trying to remember what it was. I think it was something, do you think there'll be 3-1 approved? Well, we talked about that last night, but I'm just trying to figure out, too, how do you think, with some of the returning starters going to come back and stuff, or when do you think you'll have your preview for them?
Well, I'm not going to give you an in-depth rundown on personnel regarding Purdue right now, so I will give a much more educated look at Purdue football a little bit later in the summer and as we go forward. But I think we looked at the schedule last night, did we not? And I came up with 6 wins, but I thought that was fairly generous. I thought that was not necessarily the ceiling. You had the ceiling. Your 8-4 projection I didn't think was unreasonable, but I did believe that was the ceiling. With Wisconsin, Iowa, and of course Minnesota in the division, and then your non-division games are Indiana, Michigan, correct? On the road.
Indiana, Michigan, and Rutgers.
Yeah. So there's either 1-2 or 2-1 most likely. Not that you can't beat Michigan, because you can. I'll give you a puncher's chance in that one. But I thought your 8-4 projection was a fan's projection. It was reasonable, but it was a little healthy, a little bit optimistic. And I'm more in the 6-6 range for Purdue.
Oh, one thing I want to touch on last night. How long do you think it'll be before Mel Tucker can get Michigan State back to being challenging for the Big Ten East again?
So when Mel Tucker took that job, I approached that situation from a number of angles. And from the one that you're asking, I laid that out as a very difficult lift for Mel Tucker and Michigan State for a number of reasons. First of all, Michigan is not loaded with high school football talent. It's a decent high school football producing state, but not great. It's not close to Ohio or Pennsylvania. So there's an inherent issue right there if you're at Michigan or Michigan State. Again, the high school football talent is pretty much, it's better than Indiana. It's better than most of the Midwestern states, but it's not close to Ohio and Pennsylvania, and not close to the South, obviously. So you got a problem there. Number 2, if you really look at what Mark D'Antonio did, I believe maybe a lot of people out there are not appreciating Mark D'Antonio's work at Michigan State because the end was not pretty. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't pretty past the college football playoff appearance in 2015. They had one 10-3 season after that, but mostly they were a 1 game over 500 program for the final, 16 through 19. For the final 4 seasons, you're looking at 3-9, 10-3, 7-6, 7-6. So barely over 500 for the past 4 seasons, but that's what Michigan State was before D'Antonio got there. So many people have been lulled into believing, because D'Antonio has been so amazing, that that's what Michigan State is, and that's never been what Michigan State was. They won a Rose Bowl in 1987. They had a really good year with Plaxico Burress in 1999, where they finished in the top 10 in the nation. But if you go through Michigan State football from the mid-'70s up until Mark Antonio took over, a lot of, and I'll go back to the 11-game season, a lot of 6-5, 7-4s, 5-6, barely over 500. I guarantee that if we go through Michigan State for the 30, 35 years prior to Mark Antonio, they won just about 55% of their games. So for Mel Tucker to take that, for him to take that over and to bring it to D'Antonio's level of winning Rose Bowls and winning Big Ten championships, 3 of them finishing in the top 10 like 4 times, I don't see that happening anytime soon. And he may prove me wrong, and that would be great. But I think Michigan State in that division, they are now sitting with Indiana. And they've got 3 losses sitting above them every year. So it's going to be tough for him, I think.
If memory serves, didn't George Prolis have some success with some of the Michigan State teams back in the early to mid-'82 with a couple of Rose Bowl trips too?
Gee, that's what I mentioned there. 1987, George Perlis won a Rose Bowl against USC. That was his only trip to the Rose Bowl.
All right, I'm going to give you 3 names and see if you think he might be on the hot seat. Pat Fitzgerald, Jim Harbaugh, James Franklin.
Okay. Pat Fitzgerald, no. Well, the expectations at Northwestern are still, despite their recent success, still pretty marginal at Northwestern. People, the administration at Northwestern, they understand who they are. And no, they're not going to put up with 3-9 forever, but that was just 3-9. They had a 5-7 a few years ago. Pat Fitzgerald is going to have these kind of seasons. It's a cyclical situation at Northwestern. What they're expecting there is pretty much what they've gotten out of him, and that's they're going to go 7-5, 8-4 most of the time. Then they're going to jump out and have a really nice season like they did 2 years ago when they won 9 games and went to the whatever bowl game that was against Utah and went to the Big Ten championship game. And then they're going to have that down cycle too, which they did last year. So I don't think Pat Fitzgerald's anywhere close to. I think if he goes 3-9 this year, I don't even think he's on the hot seat for the next year. Now two more of those, and we'll be talking about Pat Fitzgerald on the hot seat. But Northwestern's just a different deal, and he has so much equity there as an all-time great player, maybe the greatest player in program history, arguably, and the best coach in program history, arguably. He's got a lot of equity there. He's good to go. Jim Harbaugh, that's an interesting argument that we could debate with folks in the live chat all night, because on one level, what is he doing? He's winning at a rate that's top 10 to 15 in the nation. So at most places, they'd be doing backflips, but not at Michigan. And of course, they hate to lose to Ohio State, and that's become a yearly mark on their record. And so their difficult choice is going to be if he continues to go 10-2, 10-2, 9-3, 10-2, 9-3, 10-2, 10-2, but he keeps losing to Ohio State and not getting to the Big Ten championship, and they're paying him to be elite. So if I was running the show at Michigan, I would tell Jim Harbaugh, you need to get to the Big Ten championship game soon. And if you don't do it this year, then you are squarely on the hot seat, make or break. It's do or die. 2021, you have to. I don't care if you go 11-1, you lose to Ohio State and don't go to the Big Ten championship game, you're gone, because that's going to be 7 years. I don't think he can get fired this year unless it just all comes off the rails and they go 5-7. James Franklin, why do you throw James Franklin in that mix?
It seems like they start so good the last few years and stuff, and all of a sudden they just tank towards the end of the season.
I don't know if they tank at the end of the season, do they?
Well, last few years, when Chase McJoy there, they had a couple of 10-win seasons, but I think last year were they
7-5? No. Penn State went 11-2. They finished in the top 10. They won the Cotton Bowl.
Oh, was it? Okay. What was it? Didn't he have a couple seasons in there? They got up to hot starts and then they just fell apart at the end of the season.
No.
Won some key games or something.
No. Unless you're counting losing to Ohio State. Yeah, that they lose that game most of the time, except for 2016. But other than that, James Franklin's doing a great job, a very good job, a very good job. I'm going to hold my superlatives down a bit. He called his program great after the Ohio State game 2 years ago. It's not a great program. It's a very good program. It's a top 10 or 12 program. But no, James Franklin, they just gave him a contract extension, in fact.
Okay.
So he's fine.
I didn't hear about that. But I think Jeff Brohm will be the Big Ten Coach of the Year this year, even though Purdue is saying, with Mark, I can do this every day of the week, 24 hours a day, but I'm going to let you go because I know you got other callers wanting to talk to you. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate what you do for college football. Thank
you so much, Michael. We appreciate it. I got to tell you, I love talking to everybody. I love talking to all of you, but I especially love the conversations with the fans who root for teams that are not competing for national championships. I just love and admire those fans that root for teams that they know, hey, let's man, I'm going to be ecstatic if we go 8-4 this year. Can we go 8-4, Mark? Can we go 8-4? You think we can go 8-4? We went 4-8 last year, and then Jeff Brohm, of course, we won 6 the year before. I love that. Who do we have out there? We've got McD Sports 4, Maryland fan. We've got Michael Hogue, Purdue fan. Just most of the people that we've got watching, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, Miami. Well, Miami's a different category because basically Miami is Purdue. That might be a knock on Purdue. Let me think about that. So Miami is pretty much Purdue, but they just don't know that they are, or much of their fan base. But, obviously we've got a lot of Florida State fans that watch. We've got a lot of USC fans, or we did at one point. I think our USC people have left us. They probably completely left the team. But there's optimism. There should be optimism at USC because of the division you play in, despite your head coach. I just released a video just a couple of days ago that's got a thumbnail shot of Clay Helton, and it says, "Can't coach, can't recruit." So USC fans, you may want to check that out, and college football fans, on my thoughts on Clay Helton as I'm grilling Chris Swanson. He writes for 247 Sports. There's our Miami fan. That's one of our many who has predicted a ACC championship this year over Clemson. Tabardine, thank you so much. Would like to remind everyone that you can help us build the channel a number of ways. If nothing else, if you do nothing else, please hit the like button. Please do that. Hit the like button. It's not difficult. Please hit the like button. Down in the description section of any of the videos, you can go to Venmo or PayPal and contribute directly. Of course, we get the super chat available as well. Please share the videos out on social media. So, of course, our slant on spring practice has completely been shut down. So we were in the midst of doing position previews for spring, but there's still position previews now for hopefully the fall. We have looked at Miami, Florida, Florida State, Clemson, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa State, USC, UCLA, Notre Dame, Alabama, LSU, Kentucky. Also would like to remind you, Auburn as well. We'd like to remind everybody out there that if there are any writers, bloggers, broadcasters that you would like to see here, we've been a little shy on certain programs in regards to our coverage. We can only do so much, of course. We can only produce so much content. And I actually have people that know more about YouTube than I do, and more about social media, and more about media streaming, whether that be audio podcasts or video podcasts, than I do. And they have told me, Mark, you produce too much content. Too much. It hurts you. Too much content. Which reminds me that for the past 2 weeks, we have relaunched our audio podcast. So go to any of your major platforms, whatever your favorite audio platform is, go there and look up Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please rate, subscribe, review. Give us a review there. That will help us, as it is all connected. It's all connected. And I basically just, it's the 10-ish live show. It is, Jordan. It is. It is the 10-ish live show. Maybe we'll get better at that. Maybe that could be a mid-year resolution to be better about that. I would like to get better at other things than being on time. Being on time is not a big factor in my life right now. I am casually late across the board. That's just one of my faults in life, one of many. I just am. If I know that by being late, I'm going to let somebody down. Like if I've got to be at a meeting and I really need to be at that meeting, I will be on time. If I am, so this is a work situation, if I'm covering for somebody in particular, I will not let them down. So if I need to be on time, if I'm going to an appointment, I'm on time. But, whoa, hey, I do have an issue with being on time. That is one of my faults in life. And again, that's, for as bad as it sounds, I've got other ones that I'd like to clean up before being late. That's not a real concern of mine at this point. Hey, Nate, good to see you. Bo Weevil, go Clemson. It was so difficult for me to figure out who else watches us that doesn't root for an elite program. I came up with Michael in Purdue, and we've got McD Sports 4 in Maryland. I know that we've got other people out there that watch us on a regular basis that don't root for the elite teams. Good to see Pixie and Pete. How can the ACC lose more games? The ACC. I want to see something out of the ACC this year. I want to see that Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, or that Auburn, Florida team. That doesn't exist in the ACC. Hasn't existed for 3 or 4 years. Oh, here we go with the countdown clock. Now, some of you who may believe in superstitions may think, uh-oh, this is not a good sign. So about 5 or 6 days ago, I counted the days and the time until the opening kickoff of college football, week 0, August 29th. And I set the clock. I believe it started at 166 days and change. And basically, I can unplug it, plug it in, unplug it, and it keeps the time. This last time that I plugged it in, just before we went live, nothing. Is that an ominous sign? Possibly. All right. It's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. It's Nate.
Hey, Nate. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am doing just fine, considering everything that everybody's going through, and many people out there much worse than others.
Yeah.
So how are you?
Yeah, I guess. I'm pretty good. They gave me some tips because I kind of get really nervous when I get home. So sorry for the off topic.
Oh, that's quite all right. We want to know how you're doing. That's more important than all this other silliness we talk about.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. So I was thinking about talking about if Nebraska and or Michigan, Ohio State fans, whatever. I have high hopes, but I'm not really high hopes. In the medium, section, like if they can go like 11-2 Michigan wise, if they can, I know they might lose to Ohio State or Penn State, I don't know, but I'm looking for 11-2 for Michigan, and Nebraska maybe improve like 7-5.
Well, that seems pretty reasonable. So when you say 11-2, I typically don't project or predict the bowl games at this point. So that's 13 games, but the 12 games for Michigan. Michigan is a really good team. I know that Ohio State fans don't want to hear that, and other people don't want to hear that in regards that like to make fun of Michigan. But they cannot win that game. We know what game we're talking about. They cannot win the game. They've not been able to do that. But otherwise, they played a better season for 11 games than Ohio State did 2 years ago. Not last year. 2 years ago, they were the better team than Ohio State. Well, they showed up on the same field and obviously got obliterated. So we know that there's an issue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and that game was at home away, right? That
was in Columbus 2 years ago.
Oh yeah. And that's when Dwayne Haskins blew over.
Yep.
And blew us off, and I was like, wow, that's a blow. I just turned the TV off. That's over. Because it was a really not a game, but I want to say to Ohio State fans or ask Ohio State fans if they want like a closer game than blowouts, but I'm just asking that if they want like a better, closer game that from the older days now, but.
Well, people should always be careful as to what they hope or wish for, because I'll tell you a little story that when I moved here, where I currently live in Connecticut, and took the job that I currently have, that's located in Connecticut. That's the only reason I would move here. So I was trained partially by a Michigan fan, and he at the time. So this was in 2001. So this was prior to.
Oh, that's my birthday. Well, birth year.
That's your birth year. So this was prior to Ohio State finally beating Michigan in 2001, after Michigan dominated the series during the 90s. And he basically told me, as a Michigan fan, this rivalry is boring, and I would actually like to see Ohio State win a game. Now, I'm no longer in contact with him, but I think he would have changed his tune probably about 4 or 5 years later, after he'd gotten his brains beat in for 4 or 5 consecutive years. So things can change. It doesn't look like it's changing, but things can change. This series. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I said to somebody, or somebody like, well, in the Michigan podcast or on YouTube, I asked, I said that someday that Michigan will beat Ohio State again. So someday, but maybe not next year or whatever, but someday.
The thing, Nate, that doesn't make any sense about it is that if you take just about every other team that Ohio State plays outside of Rutgers and the really, really awful teams in the Big Ten, they've played close games, and they've come to the brink of losing or have lost to a lot lesser teams than Michigan. So it's more than just the talent difference. There's something that happens when those two teams meet on the same field, and you've got to kind of fault the preparation of Jim Harbaugh versus what was Urban Meyer, now Ryan Day's preparation for Ohio State, because there's not that big of a gap. There's a gap between the two teams. There's no question about that, but there's not a 4-score gap between those teams.
Yeah, that's true.
Ohio State's not beating Penn State like that. Penn State and Michigan are comparable, very comparable, and have been for the last 4 or 5 years. And Ohio State's not beating Penn State like that.
No. Yeah, I actually respect Ryan Day because he kind of cares about his team and stuff. Like, because he's a really good coach. He is a father to them in the Ohio State students or athletes. I mean, I actually like him. Like, I never met him in person, but if I was like a 5-star recruit, I might say I might go to Michigan or Ohio State in between. But I know I'm not an Ohio State fan, but I really like his personality and stuff. But
all right, Nate, we appreciate the phone call. So you're asking us about Michigan and Nebraska. So I'm going to say 10-2 is a bit of a stretch for Michigan, but they could certainly do that. They're as good as everybody on their schedule except Ohio State, and they've got a tough one, obviously, to start out at Washington. But they're a little bit better than Washington, but it's on the road, and they've got a game against Wisconsin that's going to be tough. And they got Minnesota at home as well. That's going to be a tough game. But I think 10-2s. I'm more in the 9-3 target for Michigan right now. And then I don't have Nebraska's schedule in front of me, but I know that they've got a difficult non-conference game against Cincinnati. And I think 7-5 is a good goal for Nebraska. I think that would be a step in the right direction, obviously, getting back to postseason play. And that sounds about right for Nebraska. Hey, Nate, we appreciate the call.
You're welcome. I'll always be at your live streams.
Awesome. We thank you so much for the support. You take care. Be safe.
Yep.
And
I will, Mark. You too.
We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, Mark. Bye.
It's our guy, Nate, Michigan fan, Nebraska fan. That's an interesting combination. Should they ever play in the Big Ten championship game, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. So he's safe, but they do play from time to time, of course, in the same conference. I mentioned the top 10 non-conference games in college football, and I believe that's what Pigskin Pete's referring to there. And I was looking for my list because I listed out, I came up with a top 10 list, and the video's out. Top 10 non-conference games for 2020, but I also expanded on that list because I obviously started with many more games than that before I selected the top 10. So, of course, as always, there's a lot of interesting games to look forward to non-conference. The ones that come to mind are obviously the huge ones, as Pigskin is telling us right there: Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, Oregon, LSU, Texas, USC, Alabama, if the Trojans can possibly hang, but we might see something similar to what we saw in 2016, 52-6. We've got North Carolina with two really intriguing games on their non-conference schedule, which, of course, is not going to factor into their run at the ACC. But to take on UCF, and then a week later, or maybe 2 weeks later, they've got Auburn. Or maybe those are back-to-back in September. UCF and Auburn for North Carolina. Miami's got a game at Michigan State. Penn State plays Virginia Tech, Lane Stadium, probably a night game. Nebraska, Cincinnati, I mentioned. Wisconsin's got Notre Dame at Lambeau Field. Looking forward to that one. That ranks high on my top 10 list. Those are the games I'm coming up with right now. Michigan, Washington, of course. Alabama, what's their big non-conference games? USC, we already mentioned that one. And then obviously you've got those ACC, SEC matchups that we always see every year. Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech. Louisville, Kentucky could be a good one this year. Is anybody substantial? Is anybody that matters talking about that BW with USC? Is it anybody that matters, anybody that has influence talking about USC going independent? I would not think that that would be the way to go. They're not exactly at the height of their powers. Ryan, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Brian Parker, who has found this in the last few weeks, I believe. And thank you so much for the contribution. It is much, much, much appreciated. Of course, the big news of the day, Trey Sermon announced his transfer to Ohio State on Twitter earlier. We talked about it. We've got a live stream posted that we went live right after we heard the news earlier today. I'd like to do that more often. So if you hear of any breaking news, transfer, obviously a coach gets fired, a coordinator gets fired, any breaking news out there, there's a series that gets signed like Georgia, Ohio State did a couple weeks ago. Those type of breaking news stories, let me know on Twitter. Just hit me up on Twitter. That would probably be the most effective way to do it. Or you can always find me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. That's my Gmail account. Easy to remember, MarkRogersTV at Gmail. While we were on the phone with Nate, a couple other people called in, so please call in 860-325-3687. Of course, if anybody's on the line right now or is going to watch the video once it records and posts, please subscribe. There you go. Shop Amazon. When you shop Amazon, please use the link in the description section of any of the videos. It's the same shopping experience. It doesn't cost you any money, and it helps us build the channel. And I had just reminded myself while I was talking about all the things we're involved in that we've got an audio podcast that I need to cut tonight. Oh boy. I forgot about that. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
How's it going, Mark? It's Grant.
Hey, Grant. How are you?
How's it going? I'm good. How about yourself, man?
I'm doing just fine. Doing just fine. What's on your mind?
Good. I just I kind of wanted to ask you what do you think of Ryan Day so far? I saw the news today, and I feel like everything's kind of just going his way the past couple of weeks. Actually, since he's been the coach.
Yeah, Ryan Day had a great season, of course. I'm not speaking anything that anyone can't deduct by looking at a 12-0 record in a Big Ten championship and a near very close loss in the college football playoff. If there's anything that Ryan Day's done wrong, no, he didn't coach the perfect game against Clemson. But besides that, the recruiting is just insane right now. And of course, these are just commits. They can flip, but it's Ohio State, so not many will flip. This is pretty much showing us what it's going to be in December when they actually sign. I wouldn't expect hardly any of these guys, if any, to defect and not commit or break their commitment. I don't know, whatever he has put in place, he and his staff, over the past several weeks to combat this situation and still be effective recruiting and bring in these kind of commits during this time has to be commended. Whatever means of communication they're using, texting these kids, talking to them on the phone, FaceTiming them, it's really effective because I don't see other schools getting the commits during this dead period that Ryan Day is.
Well, I mean, I kind of look at college football right now. We got a lot of teams, but I look at it as kind of a 4-team race. Kind of Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. Because if you look at the past recruiting classes, that's who's owning it. I kind of feel like their play speaks on the field for it too. Although I think Georgia, I mean, they kind of blew a national title a couple of years ago, and
well, we've talked about it a lot of times on here that I personally am looking for some fresh blood in the college football playoff. basically since the thing was formed in 2014. Ohio State's had a lockdown on the Big Ten. I know Michigan State made it through in 2015. And Penn State could have in 2016, but Ohio State has been by far the best team, the best program, even when they didn't win the Big Ten. In the Big Ten, they have locked down the Big Ten. Oklahoma has locked down the Big 12. Clemson is obviously owning the ACC unlike anybody anywhere else, because we could conceivably see Penn State or Michigan or somebody jump up, Wisconsin against Ohio State, or we could see possibly West Virginia almost pulled it off a couple years ago. Texas almost pulled it off, knocking off Baylor, of course, took Oklahoma to overtime in the Big 12 championship game. So they almost did it. But Oklahoma's owned the Big 12, and Clemson just, when you're winning conference championship games 38-3, and whatever the score was this last year, 62-14, whatever it was, that's just ridiculous. And even the SEC has been locked down with Alabama and Georgia. Now LSU obviously got through this past year, but it's been basically, we're talking about 6 or 7 teams every year when we talk serious college football playoff contention. And even in the Pac-12, I find a big gap and distinction even between the teams that we could talk about making the playoff versus the teams that seriously could win the national championship. Because making the playoff, let's say you're a Pac-12 team or you're Oklahoma, making the playoff, great achievement, great accomplishment, but making the playoff versus winning those next 2 games, that's a huge leap. That's a completely different stratosphere.
Exactly, it is. And, that brings me back to my next point is when Ohio State comes out to Eugene for, I believe it's week 2, I think that game is going to be a lot harder than people think it will be. I think a lot of Buckeye fans are just, oh, well, they don't really have a quarterback. It's not going to be much. I don't know. I think Oregon's going to have a top 5 defense in college football.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I did an Oregon live stream a couple weeks ago with a couple of Oregon guys, and they basically conceded that game. And in just talking to Ohio State fans, they seem to think, okay, yeah, that's a good little in-season non-conference test, early season to get us rolling, to get us, work out the kinks. But basically, people are chalking that up as an Ohio State win, and I don't get that.
No, I believe Kayvon Thibodeau, I believe he had double-digit sacks as a freshman. If not, he had 8 or 9. Yeah, I think this guy's going to be on a whole nother level this coming year. And obviously they got the 2 5-star freshmen that they're going to plug into that defense. And I believe they had almost their whole secondary return. If not 2 or 3 of the guys. And I just think it's going to be a really tough game at night in Eugene, especially this is going to be the first time we're going to see them since we beat them in the title, although none of those guys are playing still.
Yeah, it's going to have a different hype about it than the 2 previous meetings at the Rose Bowl in 2010 and then the national championship game in January of 15, where Oregon was supposed to be too quick. I never understood that analysis that people have, and Vegas obviously bought that because they were a 5 or 6 point favorite in both games. Because my thought was always, if we could take these 2 rosters, which we can, obviously, we could go back and look at the 2 rosters for both of those games and then measure the number of NFL players on those 2 rosters like 5 years later. It's not even close. So I never understood that, we run too many plays, we're too fast, we're too much tempo. I understand maybe the style of play at that point, not necessarily now, because just about everybody's playing that now. But I got it back then that this might be an adjustment for Ohio State defensively, just the pace of play. But in terms of the speed on the field, I never got that analysis. I never agreed with that analysis that people would make that Oregon would be too fast for Ohio State. What are they? I have no idea what they're looking at.
Well, again, you said Oregon was the favorite and they'd be too fast for Ohio State. I think almost that whole Ohio State team is still actively playing in the NFL. And Michael Thomas might be the best receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I just think, and then when you look at Ohio State's schedule, is Oregon the most difficult game you see right now, or is it that trip to Happy Valley? That's never a fun one.
It's a toss-up. They're both top 10 or 12 teams. That's pretty much a toss-up. I know which one's more important.
Matchup?
Pardon me?
You don't think it'll be a top 5 matchup in either one of the games?
Well, I don't know about the Penn State game. That game's actually going to be earlier than usual. I'm trying to think when that game's scheduled. I don't remember now. Anyway, I think I've got it here. Anyway, well, let's see. Preseason, Ohio State's obviously going to be probably second, and Oregon's going to be somewhere around the 10 number, somewhere in that range. And then who knows once we get to Penn State. I'm just saying that the Penn State game's more important.
Oh, no, yes, I totally agree.
It's a conference game. It's a division game. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And, well, I think Ohio State would have I think they can afford to lose to Oregon and beat Penn State and still get to the college football playoff instead of losing to Penn State and beating Oregon and still getting in. I think it looks better if they beat Penn State and lose to Oregon.
Well, it looks better. It's also early in the season, which shouldn't matter, but it does. The games are weighted more in the minds of the committee later in the season, and it speaks to how well the team is playing now versus how well they were playing in September. And then also, obviously, once you lose to an in-division team, then you need them to lose 2 games for you to get to the championship game.
Exactly. And then the last thing I wanted to get to before I let you go was, if you had to sum up what Jim Harbaugh's done so far at Michigan with one word, what would you call it?
Well, the easy one is disappointing. It's not a disaster. They're really good. They're top 15 good. He brings in top 10 to 15 classes. So it's not a disaster by any stretch, but it's disappointing. He's being paid elite money. He's being paid top 2-3 money in the country. That means you need to win championships. And he's 2015 through, he's 5 seasons in.
I'm just shocked that he's still there, frankly. I think the fact that he's still there is telling that he might still be there for another 5 years, no matter if he beats Ohio State or wins anything.
Well, we also have to consider what was going on in Michigan before he got there. He's elevated the program.
Oh, absolutely. But again, if he was fired, do you think there'd be a line of guys in line for that job, or do you think it'd be hard for them to hire a big name?
Oh, there'd be a ton of people that would want the job, but not necessarily at the level that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think like a flipping Urban Meyer to go coach Michigan type deal.
Yeah, I don't see him doing that for a number of reasons.
Well, I just mean like that type of type of guy.
There's not too many of those guys. There's what, 3?
No, you're right. There's not. Yeah.
I don't know even know if there's 3. Dabo hasn't done it anywhere else. I make the distinction with Meyer. That's incredible that he went 4 places and really 3 big places and flipped them all around. What Dabo is doing at Clemson is amazing, but he's done it at 1 place.
Exactly.
All right, Grant, we appreciate the call. You got anything else on your mind?
No, sir. That's it.
Well, you have a good night. Stay safe.
Yep, you too. I appreciate it, Mark.
Absolutely. Hope to talk to you soon.
Yep, have a good one.
David Greenshield, Ohio State's 2 touchdowns better than Oregon. They could be. It could still be a really good game, and they could win by 2 touchdowns. It could be 38-24. Still be an entertaining game. Brian, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. We got Brian Baird on the live chat. It's been wild lately. That's a good way to put it, Brian. And I find the college football talk a welcome relief, giving everything going on. It's unfortunate we don't have any news from spring practice to talk about. A little bit of fresh information would be nice, but certainly don't have that. So Brian, again, when you give to the super chat, I think many of you understand what that could potentially mean. That could potentially mean that the channel is just way beyond what it is now. There we go. Brian, if we call, is there much delay on the call, or is it real time? So what you need to do, Brian, if you call in, just turn down the volume on the background, whatever you're listening to the show on. If you're watching me on a laptop, turn the volume down, because a lot of people keep it up and I can hear the reverb in the background. And that comes across, and that confuses possibly the caller because they're hearing a delay, because you're going to hear what's going out on the live stream is maybe about 5 seconds after what's happening in real time. So just turn the volume down and you'll be fine. Came in second in the family Monopoly game. The Terps should just be that lucky, McD, that they finished second in anything. All right. You know, I got to tell you, during the conversation we've had tonight, it hit me that, again, I am obligated contractually, to a certain extent, to an audio podcast that's released every Monday on all the major audio podcast platforms. So I'm not looking forward to doing that tonight. I forgot about that. So I've got to get that out first thing in the morning. I think our work here is done. We will hopefully have more to focus on going forward. It's not going to be anytime soon. We know that we're not going to have much news to talk about concerning college football for any time soon. But we can always talk best players, impact players, breakout players, top games, non-conference, in-conference, all sorts of things we can bring up. I have here a video in the making where I've listed out the top 25 games of the decade that we just completed, 2010 through 2019. Let me read these off. Remember that 2015 Michigan State game where Michigan dropped the punt, muffed the punt snap that won the game for Michigan State and sent them to the Big Ten championship in the college football playoff. The mad scramble in the end zone, the mad dash to the end zone, yes. 2012 SEC championship game, Georgia almost beats Alabama. Of course, they get stopped at the 4-yard line. They ran out of time. The guy shouldn't have caught the ball in the flat. And they ran out of time, and Georgia lost to Alabama, 2012 SEC championship game. The Ohio State-Alabama semifinal in 2014, college football playoff. Ohio State-Michigan, 2016, the game that was marked by the J.T. Barrett 4th down conversion, of course, and then Curtis Samuel scored in overtime. That was number 2 versus 3. Got the 2017 Rose Bowl, Penn State-USC. Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley, Sam Darnold had huge games. And, of course, USC won at 52-49. National championship game of 2016, Bama-Clemson, the game that Clemson won on Deshaun Watson's heroics in the 4th quarter. Florida State-Auburn, national championship game, BCS 2013. Jameis Winston and company win it in the final 7 seconds. Auburn led at 21-3. Kick 6 game, Bama-Auburn 2013. Georgia-Oklahoma, Rose Bowl, college football semifinal game in 2017, overtime game. Bama-Clemson, the first game to conclude the 2015 season. Clemson, of course, gave Bama a great game. Deshaun Watson rang up about 500 yards of total offense. 45-40 game. I'm pontificating way too much about these games. I'll just read them off. Oklahoma State, Stanford, Fiesta Bowl game in 2011. Outback Bowl, the Jadeveon Clowney game. South Carolina, Michigan. Of course, the Jadeveon Clowney remembered game, but that was a fairly insignificant play. But a great game between South Carolina and Michigan. Outback Bowl 2012. Peach Bowl, Clemson, LSU 2012. Orange Bowl, Clemson, Ohio State 2013. Rose Bowl, Michigan State, Stanford 2013. Got the Johnny Manziel game against Duke in the Chick-fil-A Bowl 2013. That was like 52-48, something like that. Michigan State came back from 20 down to beat Baylor in the Cotton Bowl. Connor Cook, 41-40, 42-41, 2014. Bama, Mississippi State game. Big plays by Jalen Hurts, Calvin Ridley that pulled out the game in Starkville that led to Bama's playoff appearance and national championship. Arkansas, Ole Miss, a game that sent Alabama to the playoff in 2015, 52-51, crazy overtime game. Alabama, Georgia, national championship game in 2017, of course, with the Tua throw to Devonta Smith. Bama, Georgia, 2018, SEC championship game was a classic as well. The ill-fated Iowa State, Oklahoma State game after the tragedy. Oklahoma State lost their only game of the season in 2011, cost them the BCS championship game. Auburn, Georgia, 2013, the prayer at Jordan-Hare, the national championship game between Auburn and Oregon in 2010. Cam Newton, the last-second field goal for Auburn. Clemson, Ohio State, of course, in the college football playoff semifinal just this past season. I am guessing somebody else threw out some other games here. Maybe not. Well, we've got, I mentioned that one. All right, everyone. It's been a good time talking college football. We got 39 on the line. Please hit the like button before you sign off. We appreciate it. I will see everybody throughout the week. We'll do our Florida State live show. Florida State live show is coming up Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Eastern time. We may do a Notre Dame live stream tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. I will keep you updated on that, but most likely it's Notre Dame live. 6 o'clock Monday night, Florida State live at 7 o'clock Tuesday night. We need to schedule Ohio State and Miami. We will do that. I will be here live taking your calls Friday at noon as well. And this appears to be the last call of the night. Here we go. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Yeah, who's on the line?
Mark, it's McD Sports Boy. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I just saw your mail-in projection schedule preview video. I didn't realize you were live just now, so I thought I'll just hop in real quick, and I want to talk about specifically that video.
I gave you an extra win than what you had last year.
Mark, I'm very disappointed. Not only had Rutgers as a toss-up, you had Northern Illinois as a toss-up. I mean, come on, Mark. Those are wins. Those two games are going to be wins from mail-in.
McD.
McD,
I could throw the so the come on Mark I get for the Rutgers game, and again I explained there when I put toss-up is really not the right term. I didn't. I know that it's T representing toss-up, but I explained that doesn't mean it's a 50-50 game. It just means that the other team's got a reasonable chance of winning.
I did not give Rutgers a reasonable chance of being mail-in. I know we went 3-9, but we beat them 48-7.
Yeah, you beat them last year 48-7. Sure.
I mean, I just don't think I just don't think that's a toss-up. I think it's not. I just really don't think it's a toss-up. But I did want to give you credit on one thing you said in that video. And that one thing you said was the mail-in West Virginia series should be played more. I think that's a game that should be played every year. And I want to give you credit for saying you wish that game was played more. Because I agree.
I love regional rivalries, and I love old rivalries that we no longer have in college football. Texas A&M, West Virginia, Pitt. A lot of those games that we used to enjoy should be brought back. And Maryland, West Virginia is one of those games that most people, even if they're college football fans, have forgotten that used to be a staple, a standard of Eastern football when Maryland, West Virginia. See, when I was growing up, West Virginia, Maryland, Penn State, South Carolina, Miami, Louisville, Pitt were all independents. And they played ridiculously difficult schedules against each other. And that's what most of their schedule was.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a regional rivalry because Maryland, West Virginia, the border,
sure,
at least in Western Maryland, touches. So, yeah, I really hope that we play that game more. I'm happy that we're playing it this year. But overall, it was a great video at the end. Of course, I gave it a thumbs up. I'm going to leave some comments on it, but I can't believe you put Rutgers and Northern Illinois as toss-ups. That was the biggest problem I had with that video. But
okay.
I know your explanation, 80% or 75-25. I just don't see Rutgers as 75-25 for us. I think that's like 95-5, if you want me to be pretty honest.
Don't be surprised if Rutgers is not decidedly better this year. And when I say decidedly better, that doesn't mean they're going to go from 2-10 or 0-9 in the Big Ten to suddenly winning 4 games in the Big Ten. I mean that they're going to compete and be more. Greg Schiano did a great job at Rutgers the first time around, and it's going to take him some time to win games. But anytime a proven head coach, a capable proven head coach has taken over a program, they typically at least start to look like a football team. And that's what Rutgers is going to be this year. They're going to still lose all these games. I would not be surprised if they lost all 9 games in the Big Ten again, even though I think they're going to find a win somewhere. But most likely it's 0-9 in the Big Ten, maybe 1-8. And they're going to get smashed by all the big boys. But expect them to compete much, much tougher this year. And when you give me the come on for Rutgers, you know, Illinois fans could throw the come on to you on the other side. They won 6 games last year, and Maryland won 3. And for me to throw a toss-up at that one, some Illinois fans could feel slighted by that.
And I'm going to be with them. And I told you how I feel about Illinois. And I will say this about Rutgers. I thought last year, once they fired Chris Ash, I thought they had 2 more victories. I don't believe in more victories. But keeping Ohio State within the 50-point range and scoring 21 on them, and I believe they only lost to Penn State 27-6. And I thought that was like, they didn't look terrible at the end of the season. It's obvious they don't have the talent. But as I said, I don't want to really get into it. But I think it's going to take Rutgers at least 2-3 years to maybe win at least 2-3 Big Ten games. And I already told you how I feel about Greg Schiano coming back. I just don't think he's really going to be. I think he might get them into bowl games, but that's just about it. But overall, I just really think that Maryland. I just do not see that game a toss-up. Northern Illinois is the same thing. Northern Illinois was 4-8 last year, and the MAC is to me the worst football conference in the. Out of the FBS. So I just really think those 2 are going to be wins. But I agree. At Northwestern, I do think that should be a toss-up. I absolutely agree with you on that. Indiana, I would give them a bit of an edge on us right now, but toss-up, I agree with that. I still think the Michigan State game, the more I look at, I think the more we're going to win that game. But I agree it should be a toss-up. But overall, it was a great video, but I just want to get my 2 cents in on that video since I'm a Maryland fan. Thanks for my call, Mark. Go Terps. We're beating Rutgers in Northern Illinois by a lot.
All right, McD, we appreciate it. You have a good night. That's our man, McD, Terps fan. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, it does my heart good to hear from folks that are avid, hardcore college football fans, and they don't root for a team that's just going to go out there and smack everybody around and play for conference championships and be in the top 10 every season. We have a ton of Ohio State fans, Michigan fans, Clemson, LSU, Alabama fans on here, Florida. I'll put Miami in a different category because they obviously can lean on as our friend Cam Underwood calls it, and I think it's a great term, microwave dynasty. So they're kind of in a different category because they've basically been no good for 15 years, aside from a couple of top 25 finishes. But Miami's just a different deal. So their fans can rely on and brag about a history that lasted from 1983 to 2001. So they can rely on a 20-year history. But other than that, they're a different breed there. But when somebody roots for Maryland, roots for Purdue, as Michael, no. Who's our Purdue guy? Michael Hogue. Yeah, Purdue. I just think that's a tremendous. I love. We got our UAB guy. What happened to our UAB guy that used to call all the time? Anyway, Brian, we appreciate it so much for another Super Chat contribution. Thank you so much. I'm going to throw the math out there one more time. So we got 18,000 subscribers here. We've got a few more thousand on the Miami, USC, and Ohio State channels. So it's about 23,000 subscribers. Man, if we went $1 to $2 a month from everybody, okay, I'd be here full time. We would do live streams like you wouldn't believe. The content would be better. The set, we'd put a little bit of money into the set. I do have an addition coming to add to the set. There will be an addition to the set. You will have to wait and see what that is, but it should be delivered here in the next few days. I may have to have them leave it at the front door, and then I'll get the sanitizer out. And yeah. All right, everyone. Again, I believe we will have Notre Dame live tomorrow at 6, Florida State at 7 on Tuesday night. We've got to find places for Ohio State and Miami this week. Then I'll come back with another call-in show Friday at noon. That's one of the big reasons you need to subscribe. Turn on the bell for the notifications. That way you never miss a live stream. And you can be right here each and every time. What can I send you? I have a CJ Spiller poster. Brian, we are working on the set. There's a few things I need to work on. It's the call-in process. It's the set. Got a lot of things on the plate. Love the suggestion from Jesse there. MarkRogersTV fathead. Oh, that would be one ugly thing. Yeah, we would not want to see that behind me at all times. I think that would just scare way too many potential subscribers away. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for the diversion from what's going on out there in the real world. We will continue to talk college football right here. We will talk about other things going on in life, but obviously this is a college football station first and foremost. We will see you next time. Again, Notre Dame at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, Florida State at 7 on Tuesday. And yes, Michael, of course, if you send me a Purdue helmet, it's going to get placed with the other helmets. So we got some helmets there. We got some helmets there. And I try to mix them up. We got some helmets up there. Here's the helmet count. USC, Florida State, Oklahoma. Ole Miss, Clemson, Notre Dame, Alabama, Texas, Michigan, Tennessee, Ohio State, LSU, Florida, Miami, Wisconsin, Washington, Kent State. All right, we'll see everybody next time.